introducing Kristen Case and Lewis Hyde for our last in-store event of 2025. We made it. Anyway, no, it's not very exciting for you, it's very exciting for me. If you haven't yet picked up your pre-ordered book, or if you would like to buy books, you can do that at the checkout at the end of the event, from the back of the event space over there. Thank you for your support and for buying books with us. They make excellent gifts, I am told. Tonight we are here to celebrate the work of Henry David Thoreau with two authors who know a lot about him and will tell you more very shortly. A warm welcome first to Kristen Case. Kristen is a poet and scholar. She is the author of American Pragmatism in Poetic Practice, Crosscurrents from Emerson to Susan Howe, and 3 books of poetry, most recently Daphne. She's co-edited several essay collections on American writers, most recently the Oxford Handbook of Henry David Thoreau. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Lewis Hyde. Lewis is a poet, essayist, translator, and cultural critic. A MacArthur Fellow and renowned author, his previous works include The Gift, Trickster Makes This World, and A Primer for Forgetting. Hyde is a trustee of McDowell and a founding director of Creative Capital. He was previously the director of undergraduate creative writing at Harvard University and taught writing and American literature for many years at Kenyon College. Now retired, he and his wife, the writer Patricia Vidgerman, live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now without any further ado, I will hand the stage over to Kristen and Lewis. Please give them a round of applause.
Sit next to our books. Is that how this works? How's that? Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. It's lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. And I have to say, just before I begin, what an incredible honor it is to be here with Lewis Hyde, whose work has for a long time kind of helped to shape the way that I think about ways to direct the machinery and apparatus of scholarly work in a public-facing direction, and to use that machinery to kind of think about every aspect of our lives. And so I'm deeply grateful for that reorientation, and also for new ways of thinking about what it means to write a book and put it into the world. So thank you, Lewis. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to talk about our mutual friend, Henry David Thoreau. I'm going to try to briefly talk about what the calendar is. Please ask me questions later, as I won't have enough time to really do it properly. Many people who know Henry David Thoreau know him from Walden or his great essay, Civil Disobedience. And the work that I'm going to talk about tonight and read you just a little bit from is work that comes from the post-Walden era. So beginning in about 1850, Thoreau deepened his relationship to his daily journal and began taking very long walks that he documented quite meticulously in his journal, usually the following day. So often a 4-hour walk, and then the next day a long journal entry depicting all the things that he saw on that walk. He did this for about a decade, and this is what we think of as the mature journal. It's an extraordinary document, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of material in those volumes. At the very end of his life, in 1860 to 62, he did a kind of interesting thing, which is to pull together many of the observations from those journal volumes into these grid-like charts of seasonal phenomena that look like this. They are organized by month. He made these for 6 different months. Oh, thank you. Excellent. He made these for 6 months, April, May, and June, so spring into summer, and October, November, December, so fall into winter. there's a lot that's very interesting about this retrospective kind of compiling of journal information into these charts. Essentially what they do is pull together observations about the season, about the month, from across the whole journal, so across that decade, into one composite, almost collage-like view. They are organized around categories. So for example, one category for the month of December is first snow. So usually that is in December, sometimes November, but he has first snow as a category for December, and then across the decades, each time that he observed that first snowfall. But in addition to these more sort of objective, scientific phenomena, he also observed his things that had to do with his own habits and his own life. So one of the examples from the month of December that I quite love is boys skating. So when he observes children out on the river skating, and actually another that I will read from tonight is good skating. So when the skating on the river was smooth and good, he recorded those dates and annually would record those dates. So then they become a phenomenon for the month of December. There's a lot about the charts that I think is interesting. One of them is just that mixing of objective scientific seasonal information with more subjective personal information. Another is that he drew up the fall and winter charts quite close to the end of his life when he was very ill. So by the time he makes the October, November, and December charts, he's really dying. He is housebound. He is no longer able to go on those long walks, and he is no longer keeping his journal. So in that same period, he makes this move to return to the material of the journal and reorganize it in this new way. We can only speculate about why it was that was something that he wanted to do in that moment. My personal belief is that he was reconstituting the season for himself using the material of his own past experience. So reorganizing that material to create a composite view of the month that he was living through, but not able to experience as directly as he once could because of his disability. So that's a little bit about the calendar. The last thing I'll say is that the main reason for this book and the bulk of what it contributes is a reproduction of the charts with a transcription. They have not been transcribed previously, partly because nobody wanted to, largely because nobody wanted to, but also because many scholars felt that they just reproduced material that was already in the journal. They weren't really scientifically useful, unlike some of the other records that Thoreau kept. Neither were they clearly literary, and so no one quite knew what to do with them. And so they've been more or less languishing in archives for a long time. And so it's been a slow, very slow labor of love to try to transcribe them. And so that's what's in this book, along with some framing essays. And wow, you are just the best. Yes, so my great hope is that people will poke around in the transcriptions and find interesting things and think about the meaning of these charts for themselves. So you can write me emails when you disagree with my interpretations. Please do. I will now just read a little bit from the month of December, which is the end of the book. It's the last month. And this chart was drawn up. It was very likely one of the last things that he wrote in his own hand. So it was drawn up in December of 1861. Much of the writing that he was doing after that was corrections to essays. was actually, if you look at the manuscripts, in his sister's hand. So she was acting as amanuensis. And so it was very moving to me to encounter these charts as probably among the last things that he wrote. So one of the categories, as I mentioned, for the month of December is good skating. And I thought this would be a nice one to share. So in the chart, the chart entry under good skating is for the year 1856, and it just says 7 to FHP. So that's December 7th, 1856 to Fairhaven Pond. And when you go to the journal for that date, you get the full account, which is what I'm going to read you just a little bit of it, and then my thoughts about it. Take my first skate, Fairhaven P. It takes my feet a few moments to get used to the skates. I see the track of one skater who has preceded me this morning. This is the first skating. I keep mostly to the smooth ice about a rod wide next to the shore commonly, where there was an overflow a day or two ago. There is not the slightest overflow today, and yet it is warm, thermometer at 25 plus at 4:30 p.m. It must be that the river is flowing. Now I go shakily over hobbly places, now shoot over a bridge of ice only a foot wide between the water and the shore at a bend. Now I see the trembling surface of the water where what I thought were black spots of ice only around me. Occasionally I am obliged to take a few strokes over black and thin-looking ice where the neighboring bank is springy, and I am slow to acquire confidence in it. But returning, how bold I am. Where the meadow seemed only sedge and snow, I find complete ice connection. That grand old poem called Winter is round again, without any connivance of mine, an epic in blank verse, enriched with a million tinkling rhymes. Skating, so now this is me, that was Henry, this is me. Skating was among the chief joys of winter for Thoreau, who found in this activity not only amplified power of bodily extension and what he called annihilation of distance, but increased access to aspects of the natural world that were normally remote. In A Winter Walk, he had written, "No domain of nature is quite closed to man at all times, and now we draw near to the empire of the fishes." The closeness opened by a frozen pond offers a winter counterpoint to the modes of proximity afforded by summer. Our feet glide swiftly over unfathomed depths, where in summer our line tempted the pout and perch, and where the stately pickerel lured in the long corridors formed by the bulrushes. As Ian Marshall observes in his essay, Winter Tracings and Transcendental Leaps, Henry Thoreau's Skating, a really excellent essay, Thoreau celebrates skating as a liberating endeavor, opening up much of the natural world, not only for our perusal, but for our participation in its life. His journal entry from 1856 reflects both the speed and ecstatic participation, both this sense of speed and ecstatic participation, moving quickly from phenomenon to phenomenon, the sense of immediacy and motion underscored by the entry's repeated now. Along with the feeling of power derived from access to the empire of the fishes, skating provided Thoreau with seasonally specific powers of perception. In Walden, he had written, "If we knew all the laws of nature, we would need only one fact, or the description of only one actual phenomenon, to infer all the particular results at that point. Now, we know only a few laws, and our result is vitiated, not by any confusion or irregularity in nature, but by our ignorance of essential elements in the calculation. Our notions of law and harmony are commonly confined to those instances which we detect, but the harmony which results from a far greater number of seemingly conflicting but really concurring laws, which we have not detected, is still more wonderful. The particular laws are as points of view. As to the traveler, a mountain's outline varies with every step, and it has an infinite number of profiles, though absolutely only one form. Even when cleft or bored through, it is not comprehended in its entireness. Skating on the river, Thoreau rapidly collected such points of view, gathering more of the river's infinite number of profiles and bringing these impressions together in a synthesized whole. I still recur in my mind to that skate of the 31st, he wrote in February of 1855. I was enabled to get a bird's eye view of the river, to survey its length and breadth within a few hours, connect one part on the shore with another in my mind, and realize what was going on upon it from end to end, to know the whole as I ordinarily knew a few miles of it only. This desire to realize the whole of a phenomenon, in this case the river, by multiplying his perspective, is the same impulse that drives the calendar project. In both cases, the single or static view is amplified. In the one case, via the phenomenon of motion through space, and in the other, through the multiplication of discrete moments in time. The phenomenon of ice itself, as well as the reversals of ordinary perception that it affected, added to Thoreau's delight in skating. Walking on water, seeing the sky reflected on this new ground, Thoreau experienced the world with new eyes, awakening to its wonder. Like his observations of green in winter, the radical reorganization of the landscape afforded by frozen ponds and rivers was a sort of natural paradox that provided intensified perception, an experience he continually sought to communicate in his own paradox-infused representations of these encounters. Not only the earth, but the heavens are made our footstool. This is what the phenomenon of ice means. The earth is unusually inverted, and we walk upon the sky. The ice reflects the blue of the sky. The waters become solid and make a sky below. The clouds grow heavy and fall to earth, and we walk upon them. We live and walk on solidified fluids. In January of his final winter, Thoreau was visited by his friends Theo Brown and Harrison Blake. In a letter to Daniel Ricketson, Brown describes skating to Concord from Framingham to spend some hours with him in his mother's parlor, which overlooks the river that runs all through his life. Outside was a beautiful snowstorm, and according to the letter, his talk was up to the best I ever heard from him. The same depth of earnestness, the same infinite depth of fun going on at the same time. One can imagine this complex, paradoxical tone, serious, earnest, attentive, but somehow full of fun, full of the deep joy that was for him the condition of life. In Thoreau's remark to his friends that afternoon, "You have been skating on this river. Perhaps I am going to skate on some other." Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this on? It's on, yes? I don't feel it's on. Is it? Now it's on.
There you go.
Thank you. I also am indebted to Kristen, partly because once she invited me to University of Maine, Farmington. There was a project going on around things held in common, and I had a wonderful visit and got to know her and her situation. And I don't think you had even begun this project then, but this book is an edited version of the essays of Henry Thoreau. Not that I edited the book, the essays themselves, but I've written an introduction to it, and I have annotated them. The one thing I've done that earlier editions didn't do was to put the essays just in chronological order. Typically, they've been separated into what are called reform papers, so the political essays, and excursions, which are the natural history essays. And it's a false dichotomy. The things keep mixing in useful ways, so just watching him develop over the years is the way that this book allows you to see him. So I'm going to read a tiny bit of the introduction. When I was young and longed to write, I was much in love with Henry David Thoreau. I loved the plain declarative sentences and flat statements of belief from which he built his work. Surely joy is the condition of life. We must look a long time before we see. What is time but the stuff delay is made of? They are lovers of law and order who observe the law when the government breaks it. It is not indifferent to us which way we walk. There is a right way. I liked it that Thoreau sorted life into the sacred and profane, the true and the trivial, the living and the dead. Take the opening paragraph of his essay, Walking. I wish to speak a word for nature, for absolute freedom and wildness, as contrasted with freedom and culture merely civil. To regard a man as an inhabitant or part and parcel of nature rather than a member of society. I wish to make an extreme statement, make an emphatic one, for there are enough champions of civilization, the minister and the school committee, and every one of you will take care of that. I have met but one or two persons in the course of my life who understood the art of walking. That is, of taking a walk, who had a genius, so to speak, of sauntering, which word is beautifully derived, quote, from idle people who roved about the country in the Middle Ages and asked charity under the pretense of going à la santerre, to the Holy Land, till the children exclaimed, there goes a saunterer, a Holy Lander. They who never go to the Holy Land in their walks, as they pretend, are indeed mere idlers and vagabonds. But they who do go there are saunterers in the good sense, such as I mean. So the man draws a line and makes a choice. The merely civil, the mere idlers, the low life surrounds us, but we needn't be part of it. I love that elevated tone. I love the demand that followed it. We should go forth on the shortest walk in the spirit of undying adventure, never to return, prepared to send back our embalmed hearts only as relics to our desolate kingdoms. If you are ready to leave father and mother, brother and sister, wife and child and friends, and never see them again, if you've paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs, you are a free man, then you are ready for a walk. I was in my early 20s when I read these essays, and I longed for someone to tell me what to do. My life was not what I wanted. I had quit graduate school in a late adolescent huff. I wished to be a writer, but I wasn't a writer. The country was at war, my best friend in jail. I was stuck in a bad marriage, having neither the wisdom to improve it, nor the courage to leave. I was terrified of death, convinced my heart might stop at any minute. I lay in bed, unable to sleep, rebuilding in fantasy a stone wall I had once built in childhood. And I loitered near the cafe tables where the old men were saying, I believe, and we must look, and there is a right way. Believe, must, is, what a simple, beautiful verb. I want to talk like that. I did not know it then, but the voice that attracted me in these essays is rightly called prophetic. So what follows is a description of what I mean by the prophetic voice. And I'll have to get the book to see that. And then the other parts of this introduction, one of them is about Thoreau's interest in ignorance. This famous line he loves, that I love of his is, how can he remember well his ignorance, which his growth requires, who has so often to use his knowledge? It's which his growth requires. That is to say, if you don't know what you're ignorant of, you cannot do something else. Which is why you should abandon our art of AI, which is basically telling you the things we know and regurgitating them in a way that's unintelligible. Okay. And then there's a section called Signing Off. It begins actually with the fact that in the 1840s in Massachusetts, we had an established church. Our Constitution separates church and state, but there was still an established church in many situations, in the simple sense that all the citizens of Concord, Massachusetts had to pay a tax, which went to pay the salary of the minister of the local church. And you were allowed to stop paying that tax by signing off. In the library in Concord, they have a copy of Thoreau. I hereby sign off, I'm not going to church anymore, thank you very much. And so this then leads to Thoreau signing off on not paying his taxes. And then there's a section on slavery, which is mostly setting up the situation in the 1840s and 50s that Thoreau lived under. And then there's a section on John Brown. John Brown came to Concord, and both Emerson and Thoreau were impressed by him. They thought he was the real deal. And then at that point I began to have an argument with Henry because I am not a fan of John Brown. I think he was a terrorist. It may be true that you needed a terrorist to start the Civil War, but that doesn't excuse being a terrorist. So that's the bulk of the introduction. I want to say a bit about the annotations. First of all, annotations are fun to do, much more fun than writing. Because you take one little thing and you try to figure out where it is, and then you write it down and you're done. And so it's like any kind of puzzle or doing a crossword puzzle or playing a game of some kind. Quite satisfying. There's a story in one of Thoreau's journals about the farmers are out chasing a fox, and the foxhounds are running after the fox. And the fox comes into a clearing, and there's a farmer there with his gun. He shoots the fox. And the hounds come running up, and they're completely mystified. They were not chasing a dead fox. They don't know what to do. This is the way you feel after you've finished finding an annotation. Nobody cares. You tell your wife, I've been looking for weeks, and she says, yeah, so. But I found them fun to do. And in a way, they're a way to get close to the material without theorizing about it. So you just take every page and figure out things that might be the least bit mysterious and look them up. So I feel I'm much more intimate with Thoreau's journals for having done these annotations. I give you a sample here. If I can find it quickly. Well, actually, I'll tell you one thing. What is the? Oh, there's a line in which he says, "Staying at home is the heavenly way." And this was partly his own creed. He had once moved to New York City, and he didn't like it, and he came back. And this is from a book about the Saracens, and so it's Muslim wisdom, and in it, the wise man says, the disciples say, should we go out and chase after Ali or should we or not? And he says, well, going out is the way of the world, staying home is the heavenly way. And so Thoreau had read that book, and that's where he gets this, and it's in the work, and he liked it. What I liked also is, one thing that happens with annotations is you find these sources and then you find other things that you didn't know. And that book about the Saracens, at the end of it has a whole group of Muslim aphorisms. One of which was, you should contradict yourself at all times. And it was fun to see that because I thought it was Whitman who made that up. And I thought, it did not come from Concord or the New World. It came from ancient times. Or I'll tell you one other, which is, people say that the tax that Thoreau refused to pay was $1.50. And yet in Civil Disobedience, he says it was 9 shillings. So which was it, and why 9 shillings? So then I found a dictionary which explains that late into the 19th century, people in New England used the shilling as a currency of money and spoke of things in terms of shillings. And it was 6 shillings to the dollar. $1.50, 9 shillings. So, honey, I found the 9 shillings. another thing that's even more useful. So, Civil Disobedience had 3 titles. The first time he gave it as a talk, it was called The Relationship of the Individual to the Civil Society. Then it was printed the year later in a magazine called Aesthetic Papers, and it was called Resistance to Civil Government. And then after he died, it was published in one of the Reform Papers books as Civil Disobedience. And I suspect that was Thoreau's revision, but nobody quite knows. So you have 3 titles. And what's the difference between them? So resistance, in Thoreau's day, to say I am a resistor meant you were not part of a group called non-resistors, who were the Christian pacifists of that day. People like William Lloyd Garrison and Aidan Ballou, and they believed that you do not fight violence with violence. It's better to suffer than to make the other person suffer. So they were non-resistors. So for Thoreau to call his paper Resistance to Civil Government, he's declaring himself as not one of those people. And so this then builds out, was Thoreau a partisan of nonviolent resistance? It's a plausible conclusion from Civil Disobedience, because it's a nonviolent story. He's just doesn't pay his taxes. He's not an organizer. He doesn't do anything. He just doesn't pay. He gets arrested, and nothing happens. He doesn't organize something, and so it's a nonviolent moment. And in a sense, he lets himself go to jail. This is what impressed Gandhi. For Gandhi, nonviolence should include self-suffering. You should be allowed to take some kind of punishment if that's what's called for. And there's one line in Civil Disobedience, however, which says, things like this tax, they wound the conscience, and the conscience bleeds. He says, and what if real blood should flow? Implying that it's better to have real blood flow than to betray your own conscience. So this then becomes more and more obvious as Thoreau goes on. Gandhi actually says, Thoreau was never an out-and-out nonviolent resistor. So by the time you get to the 1850s, 1850 is the moment of the Fugitive Slave Act, which is a really draconian. Anybody could be arrested who refused to help take a slave back to slavery. And Thoreau gets more and more angry about this and willing to commit violence. So the last thing I want to say is in this same line so Thoreau I find useful today for many reasons. A lot of it's about the natural history. The natural history is fabulous and useful today. There's a wonderful book by William Premack called Walden Warming, in which a modern ecologist takes Thoreau's dates when flowers bloomed and when ice out happened on the ponds, and shows that climate has shifted 2 weeks since the 1850s to now. So it's useful data about the world we live in then and now. So there's that, but then the political stuff is also, to my mind, useful. And I've been thinking about this recently. So in 1854, the city of Boston was an occupied city, occupied by federal troops, and the militia, the state militia, was federalized by President Pierce. So this is not, we have things like this going on today, but they have happened before. And it was occupied because a fugitive slave named Anthony Burns was in the city and had been captured and was going to be remanded to Virginia. And the abolitionists went nuts. They tried to free him from the jail, and they killed a U.S. Marshal while doing it, and they failed. And then they sent in the Marines. And for a couple of days, the city was occupied. They marched poor Anthony Burns to the boat, and they shipped him off to Virginia. And Thoreau has an essay that is a consequence of that act, that moment. It's called Slavery in Massachusetts. And it follows, that was like maybe May of 1854. And on July 4th in Framingham, he gives a talk that becomes Slavery in Massachusetts. Now, one detail that's annotated in this book it has one paragraph which says, 2 different Massachusetts laws were broken. And if they hadn't been broken, we might have been able to save this slave. One of these laws demanded that a fugitive slave be given jury trial. And the abolitionists tried to get that to happen. Everybody ignored them. It didn't happen. The second law demanded non-cooperation. Nobody in the state of Massachusetts was supposed to cooperate with the remanding of slaves. But in fact, lots of people did. So both of these laws are broken. These are both what were called personal liberty laws. They were laws that were passed by northern states for decades before the Civil War to protect free blacks and alleged fugitives. And what's of interest to me is the second of these two, which is the non-cooperation. So what had happened was attempts to actually give blacks civil rights have been struck down by the Supreme Court because the Constitution allowed for slavery. So you couldn't do anything affirmative to help a fugitive slave or a free black, but you could do negative things. That is, you could say, I won't do this. I refuse to cooperate. And I'm interested in this because that moment is analogous to what's going on right now. We had then and now, we had a vulnerable population whose due process rights were unclear. We had a federal government that refused to cooperate with the states. When the states tried to protect people, the federal government wouldn't help. In fact, attacked the protections. And we had a federal government in 1854, as we do now, dominated by one party that also refuses to cooperate. And the analogy really is to sanctuary policies. So City of Boston has a sanctuary policy, so does Cambridge. I don't know if Brookline does. Well, you're part of the city, right? And these are non-cooperation policies. They say that policemen, school administrators, people in hospitals do not need to cooperate with immigration enforcement in any way. And the Trump people have deliberately made a list of all sanctuary policy holders in the nation and are trying to close them all down. This is a long way of saying that Thoreau is alive and well for me. I argue with him some, but this business of him having a clear, firm voice, whether you argue or feel inspired, he's there to work with. And to this day, I find him worthy of work.
What do we got, questions, answers?
I just have a comment, which is both of you at some point in your talk refer to him as Henry. I mean, it's almost like he lives in your home, or he's one of your best friends or something. I have this feeling it's much more than just something you do intellectually. Just a comment.
It's true.
I don't know if my mic is working anymore.
Push it up.
Yeah.
Hold it.
I'll just talk loud. I absolutely.
It's back on.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
back on now.
There we go, okay. Absolutely true for me. I think that's one of the great adventures of staying with a single figure for a long time, is that you do feel a kind of strange connection with a person who is not alive. That is a real relationship, and it's certainly, I know exactly what you mean about, sometimes you argue with him. I have little whole stuff about philanthropy and economy, I get just really annoyed. But there are so many more moments where I find myself grateful to be spoken to in the distinctive way that he speaks. So yeah, absolutely.
You got-
So a couple questions. Did Thoreau call it a calendar with a K, or is that, oh, he did? Do you know why?
Well, he did. Yes. So I'll answer the second part first. I do know why. It's in reference to a couple of earlier works. One in particular, the Calendarium Hortense, is a gardener's calendar or almanac from Germany, So, and he makes a kind of joking reference to like, this is my calendar with a K exclamation point. It's not entirely clear from that illusion exactly what set of documents he was talking about, but I know that title from the scholar from whom I learned the most about this work is H. Daniel Peck, and that's the term that he used, and so I'm following him. But there is that reference in the journal, and I think it comes from those earlier, kind of early English coming from the German, maybe. Yeah.
And then the second question is, so we actually, you mentioned them skating on the river as opposed to like a pond. So like in Concord, there's rivers that come together to separate the Concord and Aspect. Do you know exactly where he was skating?
I mean, all over, but
Like when I'm canoeing or
yeah, but
here?
it's I think a lot often on the Assabet. I never know which. Yeah, Assabet. Yeah, which I think runs by the if I have this right, his home, his family home, right?
Isn't Fairhaven Pond a swelling place in one of the rivers? And yeah, so I think in what you read, he goes to the Fairhaven Pond.
Yes, right.
So then it would be the Sudbury.
Yes.
Yeah. And the person who came from Framingham, I'm assuming, having grown up in Sudbury,
Yeah.
had to come on the Sudbury River.
Presumably, yes. Yeah.
A comment more than a question. Moved out here from California 7 years ago, and the first things I did was go to Walden Pond. I am a total Thoreau addict now. I didn't really know about it. And I'm listening to you guys speak, and everything I know, and I just finished watching that 6-part series on Netflix about President Garfield and Chester Arthur. I'm envisioning a 6-part Netflix series on the life of David Thoreau.
You call Netflix and then have them call us.
You guys know people. I know nobody.
Yeah.
I think it would be fascinating. His life is amazing.
It is an amazing life. He knew about so many things. This is the thing that I find really daunting is he was like a wonderful musician, and he made maps, and he just what a polymath he was makes it quite difficult for a 21st century scholar in our little compartments to be able to follow the breadth of.
I mean, I look at your book and I go, you did this beautiful thing of weird charts, and you made a beautiful book.
Also, the fullness of his journals is astounding. I mean, I really love he goes skating, and the length and detail of the skating description. I think if I went skating and I opened my journal, I went skating yesterday. So actually, Kristen, I have a question for you. So, are there things that have for you or other people arisen from the work you've already done, or that you hope will arise from it? I mean, this is a resource material that's now available, and like the pre-Mac material, it should begin to tell us things. So, is there a research, a question you'd like to have answered that you feel is buried in this, or things you and others have found that arise from it?
The biggest discovery that for me was that timing of the entries from 1861, particularly November and December of 1861. They're after the end of the journal, because then it kind of finally clicked for me that he was continuing to add to the calendar after he'd stopped keeping the daily record, and pretty clearly, I think, soliciting his friends to help him with those observations. I wish I knew more, and I hope that people are out doing this research. We know some things from the journals and from letters, but about what the process was, if Channing or other people were coming to his bedside, bringing him information. Was that at his request? Was it just kind of their habitual way that they related to one another, that Channing would bring him those observations? So I'm really interested in those last months, and we have, a smattering of
Yeah.
documents,
Yeah,
but
so
I wish
it's
there
a,
was
it's a
more.
biographical contribution.
Yeah.
Just wondered how each of you started on this journey of devoting so much of your life to one person and getting to be such experts on it. What attracted you and got you started?
Well, partly I say that in that I read him when I was young, but also I taught for many years at Kenyon College in Ohio, and I had the freedom to invent courses occasionally. And so one time I decided I would do a course on Henry Thoreau, partly to educate myself. And at that time, there wasn't any good volume of the essays. So then I said to my publisher, how about I do so, I mean, this is one of the pleasures sometimes of being in the academy, that you get to combine something you would like to do anyway with the work that you're doing in that context. So that was what sort of took me up a level, was having a chance to teach and work on it together.
I will just say that I didn't like Thoreau at first. So it took, and that partly because I was introduced too young. So I, in high school, and I thought like the same thing actually that Lewis so admires when I was 16, I found obnoxious. And I was like, why is this guy telling me what to do? And who does he think he is? And it was I think the third reading that suddenly I had a different feeling and a different relationship, and it just has never, it's less that it was instantly something that I knew I was going to devote my life to, and more that I've never gotten tired of it. So the thing that I find really remarkable about Thoreau is that it just keeps going. The work is so rich and interesting, and because he recorded so much of his adult life, he also changes his mind about things. He changes his way of, you can follow the same qualities of mind becoming more complex and interesting and picking up, he picks up Darwin, he gets impacted by John Brown, and so to follow a really extraordinary mind that is also expressing itself continually, it's just an extraordinary contribution that he, and I've, I just keep wanting to go back, so it deepens over time.
So what do you think Thoreau would make of
All of this, or
Yes,
all
your
of this?
book and what you have done, like how would is he doing this more for himself? Is he hoping someone, years later would take it and make something of it?
There's a famous story about Thoreau. His first book is 2 weeks on the Concord and Merrimack River. Or it's a week, but it took him 2 weeks. And I find it a nearly impossible book to read. Others like it, but anyway, it didn't sell. And Ticknor and Fields, which had published it, sold him the remainders. There were like 700 copies. And so there's an entry in his journal, I have a library of 800 books, 750 of which are my own. And I think, so there could have been some disappointment. It's a hard way to make a living, and even if people love the book, you don't make money off it. And I've always wondered what the fact of these calendars, I think he may have hoped to do something more from the journals. He built a special box for them, and they're at the Morgan Library in New York. So there was a sense of care and forward motion that, at the same time, he doesn't seem, his passion really was observing and writing in his journal, and it made him happy. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What would he make of it? I mean, I think he would probably say, like, go live your own life. but I do often feel, in writing this book and in kind of hunting through the manuscripts and going from the manuscript to the journal and back again and making those kind of tracings and being totally absorbed in that, I did often feel like, oh, it is a version of what he was doing, like in the natural world, like that he was taking these notes and going out into the world and then recreating them, and there was this textual web, and so to enter into that in my own way did make me feel a kinship, and so I don't know if he would recognize that kinship, but I do, and it's enough for me.
For both of you, if you were here, what topic would you want to ask? What would you want to know
This is like that New York Times, who would you invite to dinner? What would I really like to know? I guess I'd like to tell him about what happened to his legacy when it got to Gandhi and to Martin Luther King, and to ask his response to that. You know, the times are so different. The violence in Thoreau peaks in 1859, when at the eve of the Civil War, and it really was not clear that there was any compromise to get out of that. And Gandhi had the luck of being able to embarrass the British. You couldn't embarrass the Southerners. And King also had, you know, the situation is different, and in some situations you can have a successful nonviolent resistance. In others, there's an interview with Arundhati Roy saying, I don't know, if you're a little village in the middle of no place and the commandeers, you know, there are very limits to what you can do. You need a lot of things in place before it works. But anyway, I feel that his legacy has been improved, that people have figured out things to do on top of it. And I'd be curious to know, you know, get him in, think about different situations with him. And then I'd like to take a walk.
I would try to get him to talk about Emerson. I would really love to get. I would like maybe try to give him a couple of beers and then see if I could get him to talk about Emerson. I mean, I deeply love Emerson also, and I'm fascinated by that relationship and particularly the kind of misrecognition that I think went on there. And so, yeah, that if there was, I would love to. He doesn't write a lot about his feelings about other people, but where he does, it's so moving and so intense. And I don't know if he would talk to me about it, but I would love to talk to him about it. I'd love to gossip with Henry.
I heard a wonderful story the other day from Terry Tempest Williams. Was asked to write something about Thoreau's essay, The Last Days of John Brown, and the manuscript for that is at the Huntington Library in California. So she was out there looking at it. And so one page of the rough draft of that essay, she turns it over, and on the other side is a list of natural phenomena. So it's a wonderful sense of the politics and the nature are separated only by a sheet of paper. Well, there's a chance to buy books and talk informally and take it over.
Yeah, thank you both so much.